when we are deciding as parents that we want to parent differently than we were parented, we are doing that because something doesn't feel aligned. Some way that we were parented didn't quite meet our needs. And some people go into that with a lot of heavy, sad, overwhelming feelings of resentment and anger and bitterness, rage even. Some people go into that with sort of a resignation. Some people go into that with a fierce determination. Wherever you started, that's valid. Like, I did not live your childhood. I don't know what you have lived, but I trust you. I trust that you have your reasons for being here. My question would be, do you know those reasons? So when I made this journal for you guys, discovering the Sure Parent Within, part of the questioning that you answer has to do with really figuring out specifically why. What is the goal for you? What is the point for you? And part of that actually starts with giving your parents credit where credit's due. Okay. So it's not super common that there are parents that deserve no credit whatsoever, right? Could it happen? Absolutely. And that's fine. That's your story. In that case, look somewhere outside of those two biological parents, right? Maybe there was a teacher that had something that you want to emulate with your children. Maybe there's a content creator that has something that you want to emulate with your children, right? But for most of us, it's a mixed bag, and it makes it complicated. It makes it hard to figure out how to be a completely different parent, but not lose the good stuff, but not repeat the bad stuff, but have compassion and forgiveness, but also stand on our own legs and do it our way. It goes back and forth. There's a bit of a seesaw there, and that's okay. That's pretty typical. That's how it is. And there's some people who will say things, some really cool creators, this isn't a jab, of course your parents were perfectly imperfect. And there's truth in that. We all are. And there's a difference, I think, and I think it needs to be stated that there's a difference between, my parents really worked hard to show up for me in a conscious, intentional, respectful way, and also sometimes lost their cool and apologized. That's a different experience than my parents intentionally, physically, mentally, emotionally created situations that were harmful in order to gain control over me or to manipulate me or to, try to break my will, right? Like, those are very different sides of the spectrum. And while there's a freedom in that perfectly imperfect idea, sometimes it can feel a little invalidating to somebody who really has experienced a lot of childhood trauma. So I want you to know that your experience is also valid. And if you're like, no, my parents sucked, totally fair. If there is anything in your childhood that you're like, that I liked, you can pull that part out and leave all the rest, but you can pull that part out. I really enjoy putting up a tree in the winter season and putting up ornaments. That's something that's really fun to me. My mom, it wasn't even all of our life. There was one year where I don't know if it was that she had the money or that she just wanted to start a tradition or what it was, but she got me these fairy ornaments. And every year after that, we got some sort of special ornament. And I love that. Like, that's a tradition that I do with my kids. So every year we just find an ornament that means something about them this year. Last year, I think it was my son got a tennis racket ornament, and like, how random that Hallmark had a tennis racket ornament. But he plays tennis, and that's a part of his life right now. And I thought that was super cute. This year, I personally have an incredible fondness for teeny tiny mini ornaments. This year, there was way too many for me to buy them all, because when it started, there was like 3 a year and I would just buy them all. Now there's like 25, and I'm not spending $250 on tiny ornaments for no reason. But my tradition of being able to provide those for my kids, there was actually ornaments in tiny form that they each would like. So I got them tiny ornaments this year. So that's just one really specific thing that I found a lot of joy in. I find a lot of joy in it now, and I chose to bring it forward. My dad, one thing he is good at is making up random games, like random games. Like he maintained that childhoodness where a kid can play with like a ball and a stick for 6 hours. Like he's that person. He's incredibly creative. And my son does that. He made up, I think, like big ball game. I think that was the name he came up with. And he made up the rules, he made up the scoring, and we all played that as a family. And so being able to, and I don't even know if you could say I brought that forward, but I cherish it. It's something that I like seeing passed forward, right? Now, there's a lot of things that I won't pass forward. I'm not going to pass forward physical abuse. I'm not going to pass forward emotional abuse. I'm not going to pass forward shaming and mocking and things like that. That's my choice, right? And it's really important to me. Now, I'm a very sensitive person, okay? So were some of the things that were harmful to me harmful to other people? Maybe, maybe not. We all have our own experiences, but they were harmful enough to me that I'm not doing them. That's not an option for me, okay? So there's a balance to be created when you are determining what it is that you want for your family. Okay. So you decide, these are the things I want. These are the things I don't want. And once you've determined that, then you start parenting. You start parenting with this new why, this new foundational belief system, and you will hit roadblocks. It's going to happen. There's no way around it. So that could look like sleep deprivation. That could look like some other kind of stressor in your life, money stress, career stress. And you will realize that you get triggered. Something comes up that makes you much more reactive than ideal. And in that instance, you will be tempted to believe that I failed, it's all for nothing, I can't even do this, those kind of stories. It's not true. It's a moment in time, okay? Our brains are remarkably good at looking for patterns. So if you lose your cool and you scream at your kid, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And you hear that voice coming out of your mouth that sounds just like your parent, and you're like, "Oh my God, I failed. Here I was not wanting to parent like them, and I'm doing the exact same thing." Okay, take a deep breath, okay? Your brain found a pattern. Your brain, for lots of reasons, is very good at finding the things that are the same. Maybe it's 85% the same. But let's look at where there's a little bit of difference, okay? Where's that 15%? Is it in the fact that you actually recognize that that's harmful and other people thought that it was completely justified? Is it that you recognize that your child's experience of that situation is different than yours? You are aware as a human being that you have your feelings and they have theirs, and that's also valid? Is it that after that moment, you pull up and go, "Oh crap," and you go and calm down and you come back and you apologize and you own your part of that and you express to them that they deserve to be treated better? Right? Because those are all different than what you experienced. And the difference is what matters. The difference is what takes a situation from being a chronic childhood experience of emotional abuse and shame and feeling low and yucky about yourself and insecure in your attachment with your caregiver to, "That sucked. We repaired, moving on." Right? Like you have the power to actually take it from here and just bring it right on down. And you do that with those things I said. And you're doing that. So yeah, the words were the same. The tone was the same. The frustration was the same. But the end result was different because you made it different. And that difference matters. Okay? So that's a really important piece. Now, part of the steps it takes to stop that from happening, to repair when it does happen, and then to be able to move forward as a respectful, conscious parent without just drowning in guilt is the crux of what I'm about to teach in Florida next week. We have inside of us multiple layers of self, okay? This is my version of parts work, if you're familiar with that term. And a lot of these everybody knows about. Some of them people don't. But we'll start with the easiest one. We all have an inner child, okay? Just because you're 34 doesn't mean you're only 34. Within yourself, within your psyche, within your body, you still have a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 15-year-old. All of those selves, all of the people that you were at that time, they still exist within you. And some elements of our emotional healing and intelligence get a little bit stuck at whatever age that a particular trauma happened. So when we are triggered, like really triggered, what's happening is our inner child is taking over. And there's really good reasons for that. We as humans really like to heal, okay? When you burn your arm, you don't have to sit there and tell your arm, you must heal, knit back together, create new cells, right? Your body just does it because naturally that's what our body wants to do. It's not actually that different psychologically. There's nuance to that. So for some people that you know that are they still have trauma that has never been even touched, like they can't even go there. What will happen both physically and mentally is your body will build a wall. If you get a foreign body stuck, say a really, really, really bad splinter, your body will build a wall around it to try to protect it from infecting the rest of the organism physically. That happens emotionally too. So my personal belief system is that that's what narcissism actually is this incredible amount of pain and trauma that was so unsafe to feel and process and heal from that there was just this massive wall built around it psychologically, not going there. And in that wall, within that system that's blocked off, is the experience of vulnerability. Narcissists are allergic to vulnerability. They cannot go there. They absolutely cannot experience that because their psyche, in order to protect their survival, blocked that part of them off. So, barring those really, really extreme situations that are arguably fairly rare. I know that narcissism is a buzzword and everybody thinks everybody's a narcissist right now, but that's not what I'm talking about. Like really clinical situations. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about in general, your brain wants to heal. It experiences a bad situation and it's like, oh no, I don't like that. I don't like how that felt. I don't like what happened. I want to feel better. One way that it does that is called repetition compulsion. So remember, your brain is really good at patterns. It will look for an opportunity to bring that issue back to the surface to be experienced differently, to be healed and integrated. Okay, then you're done with it. You don't have to reprocess it. Unless you heal, unless your process is slower, right? So for some things like maybe an abandonment trauma, this is something that I've been working on most of my life. And it's required many, many, many corrective experiences to slowly chip away at that particular walled off part of me, okay? It's what's changed my anxious attachment to my husband into a secure attachment to my husband. It is my brain noticing the pattern, going, oh, here's an opportunity. You feel triggered. You feel like you're going to be abandoned. Bring up all of the emotion. Act like a 4-year-old who was abandoned, right? And then have a different experience. Instead of railing against the system to no avail, to nobody fixing it, to nobody caring, having a person go, okay, you're triggered. You're having this negative experience. I'm going to be with you in this and soothe your system, your nervous system, so that you can have a different experience where you think the abandonment's going to happen, but it actually doesn't. Okay, that's interesting. So now I'm developing an understanding of the differences, right? I thought this was the same. I saw the pattern, but there's enough difference that I need to add nuance. I need to add understanding. And so those experiences come up, and our inner child wants to create that repetition compulsion so that we can learn how to heal from this really yucky experience that we had. How we can learn to see it differently or experience it differently. And like, how cool is that? That's just a built-in system that happens. The downside is that when your inner child is reacting, they're not using your fully developed prefrontal cortex, because children don't have those. Okay. So your inner child is using the amount of reason and logic that maybe a 4-year-old has, or an 8-year-old, or a 12-year-old. For those of you that don't know, your prefrontal cortex is developing until 25, 26. The newer number is 28. If you have ADHD, it's even longer, like well into your 20s. Okay. You're not done at 12 or 14. So when you are reacting and you're like, oh my God, I'm acting like a child, you are. That's not a bad thing. Your inner child is saying, this needs attention. I see an opportunity for potential healing. So it's not a bad thing. Okay. In comes player 2. We also all have an inner critic. An inner critic's voice is constructed by any voices that were critical of you in your childhood. Most often, mom and dad. Sometimes it could be a grandparent. Sometimes it can be a teacher. Usually that is more of a, one specific harmful thing that was said, one specific belief that we can target and address, because they're not with you for your whole childhood, usually. But most often that inner critic voice sounds just like one of your parents. And the plus side is that if you have gotten good at setting boundaries with your own parents in this lifetime, you can use the same skills with your inner critic. Okay. But it's important to bring in voice number 3, or person number 3, or part number 3, or whatever makes more sense to your brain. And that is the inner mother. Okay. And when I say mother, I don't mean that in a literal human sense. Okay. This mother didn't birth your inner child. It's the most evolved spiritual sense of that word. She is nurturing. She is compassion. She is understanding. She is wisdom. She is kindness. She is impenetrable strength. Most of us have spent very little time cultivating that voice. Some of us maybe don't even realize that that voice is possibly in there, but it is. Okay. So the balance typically is that we've given the inner critic lots and lots and lots of power, and the inner voice of compassion, or the inner mother, very little. So our job is to do this. And that has to do with respectfully, kindly, empathically parenting both parts, the inner critic and the inner child, right? It's very tempting to tell the inner critic, hey, shut up, idiot. Does that sound compassionate? Would that make you stop? No. So the inner critic is actually there to protect us. Its strategy is informed by our upbringing. It's not great. It doesn't feel good, but it doesn't know that shame and guilt and blame and all of those things are unproductive. It's using the tools it has. So we want to look, remember the iceberg analogy, right? Whenever we have a behavior, the tip of the iceberg is that behavior, and then everything underneath is all of the why behind it. So when we are looking at an experience where our inner critic is just attacking us, right? It is saying nasty things to us. It's telling us we're the worst. We don't even deserve our children, like really mean, awful things. We need to recognize that while that feels horrible, A, doesn't make it true. B, it's actually in an attempt, a very misinformed attempt, to protect us. Why? Because we have a goal of being kind, respectful parents. So if we want that so badly and we've messed up, the inner critic says, then just don't do it. If you don't do it, you can't mess it up, right? Take that completely out of the equation. You can't mess up kids you don't have. So it starts to say these really awful things, thinking in a way it's kind of protecting us from that feeling of shame and awfulness ever again. Weird, huh? So as the voice of that inner mother, that compassion, that nurturing, you want to notice where your inner child is taking over and apply the 4 S's. If you have not read The Power of Showing Up, you must. Dr. Dan Siegel, Dr. Tina Bryson summarized secure attachment in a very concise, easy to understand way. 4 S's: safe, seen, soothed, secure. Okay. Really, the first 3 create the 4th one. The goal is the 4th one. The goal is secure attachment. Secure attachment within yourself too. Okay. I've never heard that before, but it makes sense to me, and it's how I work on myself, and it's how I help my clients work on themselves so that they show up as the parents they want to. Okay. So we are rewriting history here. We have this inner child who believes their experience, of course, it's all they know. And they are taking over, they're reacting, they're having this really intense experience. That inner voice of compassion gets to parent that inner child differently than they were parented the first time. Oh, I hear you, right? Part of being seen is being heard, being understood, empathy, okay? I hear you. You are really scared right now. I hear you. Hey, focus over here. You are seen. You are understood. You are known. Okay. Notice the change in voice. This isn't a berating. This isn't a scolding. This isn't a lecturing. This is the calmest, most nurturing, compassionate place that you possess. And you take that child and you hold them. I access my inner child here in my chest. A lot of people do. Some people don't. Whatever works for you, you do that. Okay. And you press and you hold that child and you just sit with it. Because here's the thing. Lots and lots and lots of adults are very uncomfortable with other people's feelings because their parents told them to stop having feelings. So they learned feelings are bad. Needs are bad. And what they needed was somebody who was capable of sitting with those feelings, because we all have feelings and that's not going to change. We are human beings having a human experience, which includes feelings. What we need is somebody who can go, yes, I recognize these feelings and they hurt, and you can feel them and still be safe. So we're going to feel them. We're going to feel those feelings and we're going to sit with it and we're going to be safe. Some people rock their inner child. Some people will go a little deeper and pat. Bilateral stimulation can be really soothing and help to integrate experiences. That's why it's part of EMDR. I hear you. I'm with you. You're safe. I hear you. I'm with you. You're safe. Okay. And all the tension that you're holding in your shoulders and in your chest and in your stomach and in your fists, even your jaw, starts to relax because that inner child actually starts to feel safe. Okay. At that point, often the inner critic sees their opportunity to try to make sure this doesn't happen again, which looks like, what is wrong with you? You always mess everything up. How could you do that? You're just like your mother. All of the shame, blame, criticism, right? So once your inner child is soothed, you take your inner mother and you turn and you do kind of the same thing. You start a little bit firmer. Hey, hey. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. You really want to make sure that doesn't happen again. You're mad that that happened. You do not like it. You feel a lot of shame right now, and that sucks. I hear you. Yep. Okay, get it out. Right? You're afraid that makes us just like them. I know. I know. I hear you. Okay. You understand that I understand that message. I heard you. Message received. You never want that to happen again. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to listen to you whenever you need to be heard. You don't have to scream and shout and kick and flail. You don't have to make the feeling of abject failure come up. You don't need such big, giant tools. You don't need shame and humiliation. Okay? You don't need that anymore because I'm going to listen to you. You can prompt. You can tell me with just a little bit of guilt, ooh, that didn't feel right. And I'll listen. Okay? Because I'm going to listen to you, you don't have to do those big, big, big things anymore. And you will. It's pretty strong habit, but we're going to work on it. We're going to help you to relax into your role, that protective role, and use tools that are more appropriate to the situation. Okay? I love you too, and I'm grateful for your protection. I'm grateful that you believe that we can do better. It doesn't sound like it when you're saying that we're the worst mother on the planet, but you wouldn't say that if something didn't align, right? There's an ideal here within us that we can be better mothers. If you didn't believe that, there wouldn't be any shame in the fact that we didn't meet that goal, right? So I hear you. This is important, and I agree. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to use our compassion for us as a person having this experience to create safety, knowing, soothing, and security. And once we're good, then we're going to go and address that child and do the same thing with them. You good? Okay. Let's go talk to our kid. Now it takes a minute. It does. You're not going to have time to do all of that all of the time. Totally fair. But do it some of the time. Do it once a week, once a month, once a freaking year. I don't care. Do it at some point. Turn on this video, rewatch it, access your inner child, access your inner critic, and access your inner voice of compassion, your inner mother, your inner healer, whatever that is. Find those people in you and use those parts to create self-compassion, because you do deserve self-compassion. Every person deserves self-compassion. From a place of self-compassion, from a place of security in yourself, you can grow and heal and become a better version of you. You can show up better for your kids. When we feel absolutely awful, when we are listening to that inner critic and just buying into everything she says, then we believe we cannot do better than that. And we stay stuck. When we buy into our inner child's experience, the catastrophizing, the panic, we stay stuck. So we want to have a lot of compassion for those parts of ourselves. And we want to create the safety and security that allows us to take that next step forward, to do better. That comes from that inner compassion, that inner voice of wisdom and kindness and nurturing, even if you never had it before. If you want to show up like that for your kid, practice with yourself. Practice with this kid. Even if you don't have kids, right? I actually talk to some people that do not have children. You still have an inner child. And that inner child still needs to be heard. What if you're a guy? I'm going to ask you to tell me. You've most often had an experience with a mother. Do you have an inner mother voice? Or is it an inner father voice? I'm curious. I would like you to tell me. I have a couple of dads that I work with, and I'm very curious what their experience, their inner experience is. Because I don't know. I'm not a man. But the vast majority of my clients are moms and women. And I encourage you, use whatever words make sense to you. I think the inner voice of compassion makes the most sense, but it is less humanoid more abstract. So sometimes when people are trying to create an understanding of their parts, it makes more sense to give them more of a caricature than just a voice. So higher self even could come into this, a non-gendered higher self, if that works for you. But there's this spiritual connection to some sort of space without ego, right? We have an ego. We have to protect ourselves. We have to be wary. We have to be a little mistrusting. We have to make assumptions and judgment calls. And, you know, we live in a world with other people and with real threats, and we have to have that protection. But on an energetic level, we don't have to. So if we can access that through our inner voice of compassion or inner mother, there's just light and love and warmth and acceptance and nurturing and safety. And that's the energy that we want to bring into this conversation within ourselves. And, you know, some people get really uncomfortable with parts work. It makes them feel kind of crazy. But the thing is, it's happening anyway. The experience is happening anyway. When you react and you have no control over yourself, your conscious mind isn't in control. Some other part of you is. So you do have the parts. It does not make you crazy to intentionally target and respond to them. It makes you attuned. Attuned to you, even if no one else was. And yeah, it takes practice. It's totally okay. I recommend doing it by yourself for a while. And then once you've practiced, once you get familiar with those voices, you can do it non-verbally. You can do it just with a touch. I had all this anxiety one day, and I was like, man, my inner child's really having a reaction right now. So I just put my hand on my chest and I thought, what is it that you're hoping happens here? And my anxiety immediately went down. Because she didn't know. She wasn't hoping for anything. She was worried about an outcome that was not in existence. But she's so used to worrying that it felt like, yep, it's probably right to sit here and worry. So when I said, thought, what is it that you're hoping happens? Oh, if I had to give words to it, it would be that I'm safe. But I am. Okay, then I can relax. Right? So sometimes it's really, really quick, and that's fine. Sometimes it's, hey, I got you. Right? You'll notice in EFT tapping, one of the parts is on your collarbone and one of the parts is under your arm. And so for me, sort of a in between both of those is right on my chest bone, right on my sternum. And that is how I relax a lot of the time. The other points are, let's see, top of the head, forehead, side of the eye, under your nose, under your mouth, collarbone, and then side of the arm. So you can do one of those points if that resonates with you. Some people will kind of clasp their hands together like they're holding their inner child's hand. Some people will put their hand on their shoulder like, hey, got you. You're good. I got you. Right? Whatever it looks like for you, it's very, very personal. And nobody has to know what specifically you're doing. You are creating security with yourself. You are creating soothing with yourself. I have a client who tells people to look at the back of their left hand to bring them back into their bodies when they're spiraling out emotionally. And it works, right? So take some time. Names can help if you like that. For me, my inner child is different enough from me today that I call her Samantha. When I was younger, it was very important to me that people called me by my name and not any nicknames. Now I obviously go by Sammy. So that distinction is helpful. But honestly, most of the time, I'm just like, hey, baby girl, you're okay. I talk to her the way I talk to my daughter. I don't actually use my daughter's name that often. So it's more endearing terms. For you, it might be a nickname. It might be something completely different. It might be little one, it doesn't have to, there's no rules. This is very, very personal to you. And if you want to talk about it, if you want to share, I would love to have that conversation with you. I would love to know what your inner child is called. I would love to know what she needs from a mother. I would love to know what she needs to feel safe and secure in this world. Okay. And remember, one of the rules of attachment is that you actually only need one adult that can provide a secure attachment in order to have your own secure attachment. Ideally, of course, you would want to, but you don't need to. Right. So some people are concerned because there's not, in this particular practice, in this particular approach, there's not also an inner father voice. You are welcome to find that. If maybe that's what you resonate with, do that. Right. There's a wisdom and a protective energy there. For me, it doesn't resonate. I don't feel like I have that. That doesn't mean it doesn't for you. Right. If you have both, sweet, do that. Let them come together to protect your inner child. If not, if you're more like me, then that's okay too, because you only need one. Okay. So take some time to nurture your inner child, to help your inner critic feel safe, to make it possible for them to not use such drastic tools to keep you safe, and create security within yourself so that you can release your triggers, so you can show up the way that you really, truly, deeply want to in this relationship with your children. And I know it's a lot of work. And I know that it can feel overwhelming. And I know that all of the work that we do is that much less that our kids have to do. And it doesn't have to be 100%. Right? You are not responsible for breaking every single freaking chain that has ever existed in your family lineage. For some of you, you're working on one specific chain, and it's a really, really hard one. For some of you, you're working on this length of chain. And then your kids will pick up here and keep going. That is the beauty of the epigenetic shift that we're creating. We do the best that we can, we do the most that we can, and then they have the tools to pick up and keep going and do even more. And that's incredible. I believe in that with my whole heart, that the work I'm doing matters, not just for my children's experience, but for mine, for my grandchildren, for their grandchildren, for the people whose lives they touch in 3 generations. It matters. And energetically, it even goes backwards. Like there's healing that can be had even going backwards. The work's worth it. The work's hard, but the work's worth it. So I value you. I appreciate that you're here on this journey with me. I think you're amazing, and I know you can do it. I'll talk to you later.